Hello, boxing fight fans around the world. Thank you for joining us on another episode featuring Christian from the Friday night panel as he discusses the Olympics, especially boxing, to take place this July in Tokyo. And what do you have for us today, Christian?
Well, we've got a few things on the go today, not just the Olympics, but also there's some big tournaments that are going to be happening on either side of the Olympics that we're going to discuss a little bit today as well. So to start off, though, the Hong Kong government has acquired broadcast rights to July's Tokyo Olympics. Now, they're doing this in order to allow their citizens to watch the games for free, which is a bit of a departure for them, so that they can cheer for athletes from Hong Kong as well as mainland China. Now, this was just announced today. The games will now be shown free of charge on free-to-air channels as well as television broadcasters. Hong Kong's commercial broadcasters last year had failed to reach a deal with licensor Dentsu, citing the high cost of rights as well as their own financial difficulties after the games were postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The rights issue had been left unsettled at that point, and this is why the government stepped in. Now, the cost of this deal has not been disclosed, and the government said that the fees will be refunded in the event that the games end up getting canceled. The city's chief executive, Carrie Lam, said that this unprecedented use of taxpayer money was prompted by the authorities' mandate to promote sports. She also blamed anti-government protests in 2019 and 2020, as well as the coronavirus, for weakening broadcasters' finances, and stressing that this is a one-off special case. Broadcasters will be required to air all events that involve Hong Kong athletes, and pay channels will be required to show any games content in an unencrypted form so that the public can have full access to the event and support athletes, again, both from Hong Kong and China. So things are opening up a little bit there. So our friends in Hong Kong are going to get a bit of a better chance to see at least their locals and anything that involves them. So that'll go a little bit for them, hopefully. It's a step to a little bit more transparency. But looking after the games are done, right on the tail end of the games, we've got the men's World Championships that'll be coming up as well. So we heard from Istvan Kovac, Secretary General of the International Boxing Association, AIBA, you guys know. And he has said that AIBA Men's World Boxing Championship later this year in Belgrade is going to raise the bar significantly for sport in the region. After visiting the Balkan Boxing Championships, which took place in Zagreb, Croatia, he met with the leadership of the national federations of that region. Now, Kovac spoke of his confidence in the success of the championships, which AIBA announced will take place in the Serbian capital, running from October 26th of this year through to November the 6th. He said, "We had a fruitful discussion on the current situation of boxing development in the region. I appreciate the efforts, pardon me, that the Balkan presidents and secretaries generals do to keep boxing in the region at such a high level. What's more, I believe that AIBA Men's World Boxing Championships in Serbia will raise the bar significantly. AIBA's reform process is in a good way, which is noticeable for the national federations. We will help them on a daily basis to ensure that there is progress in each country." AIBA's flagship tournament, which follows last month's staging of the AIBA Youth World Championships in Poland, is going to be a milestone in the boxing calendar this year, with the best athletes set to compete from around the world. And again, keeping in mind that this is going to be right on the tail end of the Olympics. So we're going to be seeing hopefully a few grudge matches by the time we get to this particular tournament, based on some things that we saw at the Olympics. Now, the upcoming upon confirmation of the dates for this tournament, AIBA President Umar Kremlev expressed his desire for boxing to continue developing despite the challenging situation with COVID-19, saying, "We should be united like never before during these challenging times and give our athletes opportunity to perform at the highest level. The AIBA Men's World Boxing Championships will show our determination to provide a platform for boxers all around the world to achieve their full potential. We have full confidence that the tournament will be conducted safely, given our successful implementation of COVID-19 countermeasures throughout the course of this year. The progress AIBA has made and will continue to make from a reform perspective will be evident at the World Championships. We are placing significant emphasis on improving the transparency of our sport as well as our governance. We have already at this point implemented open scoring after each round, and this is only the beginning. We will transform our rules for the benefit of boxers, as well as to making things clearer for spectators. The World Championships will be a real celebration of the sport of boxing. So this is going to be the first edition of the AIBA Men's World Boxing Championships since it was hosted in Ekaterinburg, Russia, back in 2019. Belgrade itself, which last hosted this tournament in the men's tournament in 1978, was awarded this year's edition of the tournament just in April after AIBA stripped New Delhi of its hosting rights. Now, it was claimed at the time that the Boxing Federation of India had not paid the hosting fees required as part of the host city agreement. In retrospect, however, I would have to kind of say that even if this was due to be held in Delhi, much like the Asian Championships, I think we would probably be seeing this rescheduled, if not relocated. Just given the current situation, things, I think the AIB would probably be taking those steps to distance themselves from what's going on in Delhi, even recognizing that this wasn't due to take place until October. But another tournament. Now, that's on the tail end of our Olympic Games that we like to talk about here. But before we get to the Olympic Games, we've still got the Asian the Asian Championships happening. So we've heard today that the Iranian Boxing Federation is planning on sending 8 male competitors to the ASBC Asian Elite Boxing Championships, including 2 of their Olympic quota holders, Daniel Shakbash, as well as Saeed Shaheen Musavi. Now, they are currently training at Uzbekistan's national training camp located in Yengiabad, in a mountain area which they claim is perfect for athletes' physical conditioning. And to be fair, many national teams have visited that training camp in recent years to train with the strong Uzbeks, such as the Cubans, the English, the Kazakhs, as well as the Hungarians, and taking advantage of that one. And I've been telling you guys to watch out for the Uzbeks once we get to the games as well. So Iranian boxers ranked 16th in the medal table at Bangkok 2019, which was the last ASBC Asian Elite Boxing Championships, with just 1 bronze. So their goal at the upcoming Dubai 2021 edition is going to be to reach a better performance level and to prove that the new implementation that they've done in their program has paid off, because they've been bragging a bit about that one. Also at this tournament, this is a little bit bigger than them, is Umar Marshall is set to return to amateur boxing in just a little 2 months before the Olympics. So according to the Association of Boxing Alliances of the Philippines, ABAP for short, that's Secretary General Ed Pixon, the Filipino fighter is committed to joining the Asian Elite Championships in Dubai. So Marshall returned to his hometown of Zamboanga after training in Los Angeles in a professional setting since just this last October. So 3 other boxers who have qualified for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, Irish Magno, Neti Petecchio, and Carlo Palam, are training at the Thailand National Sports Center in Moklek since March 2021. Now, these 3 boxers, unfortunately, are not going to be able to participate in the Dubai tournament. Now, this is entirely due to quarantine protocols that they would have to go through between Thailand and Dubai. ABAP assured that Marshall will be training with the rest of the team in Thailand after the elite tournament, saying, "We are happy that he said that he is going to go to Thailand. We appreciate that, but we're hoping that he is doing well in Zamboanga." Where he is training under ABAP coach Jensen Nides and sparring with his cousin. Now, you guys may remember that he's been training as part of Manny Pacquiao Productions in LA for the last little while. And there had been some question as to whether or not he was going to be joining the national team at all. Initially, wanting to stay in the U.S. right up until the Olympics themselves and could continue training there, I believe, with Eddie Roach. So, and the national team had been trying to get him back, and it had been kind of this big juggling match where they said, "No, you send a coach over to the U.S." And they said, "Okay, we'll do that." But then the coach couldn't get a visa into the U.S., so they've sorted it all out. He's back in the Philippines at this point, and he'll be moving himself over to after Dubai, he'll be rejoining everyone in Thailand, and that's where they will run out the clock before the actual games start off themselves. But that's it from around the rings this morning, Graham.
That fits into the category of wow. That was a great report, Christian. I mean,
we've got stuff coming on either side of the Olympics. I know we get bogged down with the Olympics themselves, but remember, we've got big boxing happening on either side.
I just only have a small thought, and that is with respect to broadcasting during COVID. You would think that the broadcast rights would be actually expensive, seeing you have, shall we say, a captured audience sitting on their couches doing nothing. I mean, what?
Well, I don't doubt that they are, but the problem is everything else has been slowed down. So broadcasters aren't making money. So they never reached a deal when everything got pushed back. The first time they were still in negotiations when the games themselves got pushed back, and this was unresolved as to who was going to have those rights. Everybody's saying they're broke because you have to remember in Hong Kong, especially before COVID even happened, they were having the rounds of Hong Kong was basically shut down due to the ongoing protests. So due to those protests and everything else that was going on, broadcasters saying, well, we're out of money here and we don't know what to do, which is why the government at this point has stepped in to say we're going to cover the costs on this one, assuming that the games go forward. And that's why they stress that this is a one-off, because those rights, I guarantee you, are still expensive. But now it's the government paying for it as opposed to the local broadcasters or advertisers. Just all comes down to who's going to pick up the bill.
Absolutely. And all I would argue is, as with all things, the consumer picks up the bill.
Oh yeah, and like you said as well, and our producer chimed in quietly there. We have all been stuck on our couches for a year at this point, which means if it's on TV, we've probably seen it. So I'm not sure what the big equivalent is in South Asia for Netflix. I know there is Netflix as well, but I'm sure there's local streaming services as well. And those who have access to internet and television and things like that, who have been quarantining, I'm sure they're no different than us. We've run through everything we're seeing a couple of times on Netflix by now over the course of the last year. So Big T just popped in here with a question asking, actually stating rather correctly that our friends in Asia and Europe, as well as Africa, have been pretty committed to getting involved with some big tournaments in the run-up to the games. And it wants to know if we feel that we're at a bit of a disadvantage. I would say absolutely. The Canadians for sure. I know in the US they're still boxing locally. There was a Golden Gloves tournament that took place down in Texas not long ago. So they're still holding a lot of regional stuff in the US at least. But I know most of what's going on in Brazil, Argentina, and places like that are currently large hotspots. Everything's ground to a halt, and you're just basically relying on your national training camps at this point in time. So yeah, we're definitely, because we're sitting at home basically as far as our national team is concerned. The Montreal camp got disbanded early, and they've sent. I know we talked a little while ago. Some of our boxers have been sent back home to Kitchener and Nova Scotia and places like that. So. Yeah, absolutely a bit of a disadvantage. You can do so much with training camps. You can do some great sparring against your own teammates, against sparring partners. If you're lucky enough to be in a training camp where you do, there are multiple Olympic committees at a training camp, like say in Thailand right now, where our Filipino friends are. They're getting a chance to spar against opponents from other countries as well. And while it's not quite, and that's helpful, that's great, it's still not competition. Because it's still sparring, and that's the difference between the pillow fights that we talk about with Tyson these days and actual professional matches as well. Sparring is not actual competing. So anyone who is in a position to be competing, obviously leaving enough time for recovery, both mental and physical, afterwards, but or in the run up to the games. But anyone who is competing this month or the beginning of next month is going to have an advantage over those who are just stuck in training camps. That's just. It's just the truth, obviously barring any injuries, of course.
I think it opens up the possibility for, shall we say, wild cards at the Olympics. People who we may not have had on the radar because of the lack of tournaments. In days gone by, we would have seen great Cubans come out of the blue, who we've never even heard of, and beat the heck out of, for example, Canadians.
Well, it's because they would have been training in Russia with the Soviets at that time.
Okay, that's one way of looking at it.
You may not have heard of them, but they've been training with the Soviets since the 60s.
So
That's one of the reasons the Cubans have always been so good in this sport.
I'm just simply saying. So for those South American countries that we may have been normally following in the run up to the Olympics, but we're not following because of the lack of tournaments. That's not to say that they're not training, and that's not to say that they don't have any sleepers who may be wild cards at the Olympics. That's all I'm saying.
Oh no, but added disadvantage for the lack of participation in
Yeah,
tournaments. I mean, that's something we've been discussing a little bit with the Indian team, with them, trying to get to tournaments and that shut down. They get to a tournament, 3 people get COVID, and they have to get shut down again. So they haven't been able to compete as a unit kind of thing. They've been able to send a couple of people here, a couple of people there over the last few tournaments, even though they're trying to compete. You see what can happen to you, and I don't think we're going to see the competitive edge from them that we normally would have seen at this Olympics either.
and it'd be interesting. Last point, sorry, but I'm just thinking about Mexico. Most of the Mexicans that we've spoken to say there's no money in amateur boxing anyway. So most incredibly talented teenagers you'll find entering the pro ranks. And it's quite a common thing to do because there are so many professional tournaments being held at a local level in Mexico. So even though they have a great fighting heritage, I wouldn't see them putting forward a huge Olympic team anyway, because the vast majority of their very talented amateur fighters quickly enter the professional ring.
Well, I think you're going to get that top tier percent is always going to be part of the national team because, especially in countries like that, if you are at the top of your game, you are funded. Okay. So they're going to be taking the top, but if you're even just below the very top, yeah, you're turning pro because there's no money in it. There is money in it if you are an Olympian. There's money in because you're going to have your training subsidized. You're going to have things like subsidized rent and things like that, especially down in South America. You're going to have there'll be some bonuses to the fact that you're doing this. And also you're going to get that exposure that we keep talking about that translates into better fights when you go pro because you've already got that resume. It's like being an actor and be able to, anyone who's ever been nominated goes Academy Award nominated, even if they didn't win, they stick that in front of the name on movie previews.
True.
Olympic boxer, as opposed to just boxer, goes a long way on that resume and getting you those fights. But if you're not at the very top tier of that, then it's no point in you struggling at that point to try to get through into an Olympic spot when you could have just gone pro at some of these smaller tournaments. And yes, you're not going to be making, you're not going to be seeing Alvarez money, but you can start actually earning a living in boxing at a younger age without trying to get into a large tournament like the Olympics. Unfortunately.
Right on. Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much for viewers out in the UK and Europe. They're commenting a lot, I see, which is good. We thank you for that. Those comments are awesome. Anything to say to that last comment that just popped up, Christian? It's an interesting comment. It's out of the US team. It's not like it's not. I was just going to say it's not like the U.S. has any shortage of amateur fighters. Wow, that's a huge country. But at the end of the day,
we're not going to know until June exactly how this new criteria is going to roll out because they're not going to announce it till June what the final rankings are. And as we know, there's currently some legal challenges as well to that ranking decision. Most notably, Mandy Bujold, when that's still out. The jury, so to speak, is still out on that one. Or the Court of Arbitration for Sport, I should say, is still out on that one. But as soon as we hear back, we'll let you know on that. But we won't be hearing exactly how they've divvied everything up as far as those spots go for North versus South versus Central America and everything else until that's released in June. But as things sit right now, if you're just looking at just points, we weirdly wouldn't be seeing too many U.S. fighters. That'll change between now and the games, though, for sure. There's no way you're keeping the Americans out.
Absolutely. All righty. Thanks very much, Christian. Appreciate it. And I hope there's some news that pops up on your radar for tomorrow's episode because that was quite a mouthful today.
Well, there's always something going on.
Good. Thanks very much. We'll see you tomorrow.
We'll talk then.